Hi guys, and welcome back. This is part 3 in the hard drive EMU emulator board, and in this one we're going to go through the software setup and getting ready to archive a disk. So I'd just like to give a really heartfelt thank you to one of the computer group's users and contributors, Ashlyn. And Ashlyn, I would like to thank you very much for helping me. He gave me a hand with Linux. I don't know Linux. I'm DOS and Windows based, so the things you got to do in Linux sort of drive me a bit nuts. But anyway, if you know it, it's easy. If you don't know it, it's a nightmare. But he was really good in stepping me through the steps on what to do and how to do it. Ashlyn has also made these EMU boards, the earlier versions, not the version 3 and 4s, or the C and D, I should say. So he gave me some head up on how to archive the drives and things like that, and so we'll take that trip down through all of this when it comes up. Alright guys, so hopefully you're ready for this and you've stocked up on some drinks and some snacks and gotten that chair and the notebook and some pens and pencils to make notes. So, without any ado, I think it's about time we got on with it.
Stand by for action.
Hi guys, welcome back. So, in here we're going to get into doing the software side of this machine and get it up and running and take an image of the hard disk at least. Okay, so this is what we're going to go down. And as again, I would like to say a big thank you to Ashlyn Linwood for helping me out in setting this up with Linux and that, because I have no idea. I do now. A little bit. I can't say I'll retain it all, but I do have an idea now. Anyway, one thing to remember, you got your beagle bone, and if you've gone through and done your board, like I have, I'll switch you to the overhead and we can go from there. Okay, hang on a sec. Right, I've got my board, and one thing to remember is that depending on what board you've got and what you're doing, my beagle bone goes on the bottom of my board, not the top. So make sure, I'll just get that out of the way, eh? I didn't see that there. So just make sure that your beagle bone plugs in the right way on your board to make sure. The other thing I have to bring up is that depending on what version of beagle bone you're running, if you're running an older version, I think it's pre-2003, you need to remove R24 and R25 off of this board, and you have to change R19. That's if you're running also this DC to DC, because this one is for the voltages. This one is, these two resistors work along with the DC to DC for turn on, turn off. There is a pin on here which is for on and off, and that's what these two resistors are for. But on these versions of beagle bones, the 2003, 2023 and earlier, you have to take those out because it's a bit glitchy on what it does. By taking them out, it fixes the problem. The other problem I had is I put in a 264 ohm resistor on here for this inverter, and it was the wrong one. It needed to be a 3.73 something K resistor. I put in a 3.7K, and my voltages dropped down to the correct voltages, and that's what these test pin connectors are on the board for. I tested it between ground and my 5-volt pin, and I was having 10 volts, and I couldn't work it out. I thought it was the DC that was faulty, the DC to DC. I thought it was in back to front, and I went down all those tracks, and then Ashlyn helped me track it down to the resistor was wrong for it. There is actually some notes, if you read further on the web page, that tells you about that. So that was something I mucked up on, and I've let the guys so far know that that resistor needs to be replaced, and not to put the 300 ohm one in, and to put put a 3.7K in there. And to also remove these two resistors as well. That is also on the web page further down in release notes. So that's all I had to do to this. The LED, I found out, tells you when the super caps are charging. It'll be dull, and then it gets brighter as they charge up, and then they'll go from bright to when they're discharging, they'll go until they go dull again. And these F10s that we've got in here, they hold the charge for a wee while. I can tell you, I don't think there'll be any issues with it shutting down gracefully with the capacitors that are on there. But I think better more than not enough. And if you get to the point that everything's shut down, you can jumper it on the drain side, and that will discharge them fairly quick. But when you use this, it has to be on fill, so the capacitors have to fill up. Okay, guys? So just a couple of caveats there, just to note on that. I will get you the correct size of that resistor I had to replace too. I just can't remember exactly what it was. I think it was 3.7 something K. But anyway, so that's all done. So to set this up, the ROM is a different option that a lot of people don't use, because you can actually put a image of a hard drive on it and get it to boot from it if you want to. So I'm not going to worry about that. That's there for later use if I want to use it. So we're just going to use this because I want this for archiving the hard drive and other hard drives as I come across them. We're going to go about flashing this and taking you through the steps of doing that as I was showing. The first things you're going to need is a power supply for this, and you can use either a USB power supply, and on the BeagleBone it has a USB mini B and a USB A. The USB A is a host connector. You need to use the USB B or the barrel jack if you've got a power pack for that. So I've got a mini B wall wart connector, as they call them, just a standard USB one. I'm going to use that plug into here. The other thing you're going to need is a network cable, and you're also going to need a connection to a router to connect to your PC. I'm not doing it through Wi-Fi, I'm doing it through cable connections just for reliability, but you need a router or a hub that you can connect through to a PC. Okay, so you're going to need that. So you can get cheap little hubs around the place. I've got a couple of old Linksys ones I'm using, and so I've just used that. So we're going to need those to plug into this to power it up and connect to it. The other thing you're going to need some bits of software, and one of them is you're going to need a terminal program. If you don't have one, guys, I'll just run you through what I used and what I put on, and we can go from there. So I downloaded Putty for Windows, and I've got a 64-bit version of Windows. So you can go to the Putty website, and on there you can download different versions for what you're using: Mac, Linux, 16-bit Windows, 32-bit Windows, or 64-bit Windows. You can download whichever ones you want. Now Putty is what we're going to use as a terminal to SSH into the BeagleBone, because when we flash this with the software, this is going to be running Linux, basically, is what it will be running to run the backup board. We need to download a copy of Putty. We also need to download, because this is an older version, I had to flash it with the version 7.11 before I could update it to the latest version 11 of the OS to go on here. So I'll take you through that. So I had to get down Rufus, which you use for flashing an SD card to be able to then put the software on here, and we need to do that with the version 7 OS and the version 11 OS. So we put the version 7 on first, then we go through, we set it all up, we make sure we can log into this. Once that's all done and fine, then we take the SD card, we put it in and load up the version 11 software, and then we put that on here and install it and run it and make sure we can access it. Then once all that's done, then we're onto the board. Okay, so I'll just now take you through going through and setting up this with the PC as well, and we'll go through downloading the software, installing it onto the BeagleBone, and accessing it and doing the other bits and pieces. Alright guys, so we will get on and do that now. Right guys, so here we are, we're on the net now, and just type in rufus.ie/en for English, and that should take you to the website. And on here, this is what we want: is Rufus, create a bootable USB drive, and that's the one we want. So what we do is scroll down, and then it'll come down to the bottom here where it's got the downloads. Now the one I downloaded is this top one here, because I just want the standard. Portable is for, I think you put it on a flash drive or something and you can use it on any machine. But I just downloaded the standard version and download that exe, put it onto my machine in a folder, and then once you've done that, you just double click it and run it, and it will install Rufus on your machine. There's no big drama with it. You may get a pop-up through Windows or something asking for security, or are you allowing this to access your machine, etc. Just allow it to do it, and then it should be fine. And it should put a executable or a link on your desktop so you can run Rufus. Alright, so get that and download it and put it on your machine. What I did with all these files, I actually made a folder for the HDD EMU, and I put all these files into that folder, so I knew they were all in one place. So make sure you do that yourself. Just make sure they're all going into that one place. Once you're finished downloading Rufus, what we need to do is then go and get the older version of the OS and the newer version of the OS from the PDP-8 website. So we'll shoot there now to do that. Okay, and so here are the links to the files we want to download. Now both of these files are going to be archived. Once we've downloaded these files, we're going to have to unarchive them. You're going to need something like WinRAR or 7-zip or something like that that can handle RAR files to extract them onto the machine. So if we just go into these links here, and I will put these links on the description of the video as well, then we can download these two files and save them into the same folder where we've downloaded our Rufus into. Okay, so go ahead and do that, and then we can carry on with the installation. Okay guys, I'm in my folder, MFM hard drive EMU, and there is the two image files I've got, and one is version 7, which is this one here, and the other one is version 11. So what you do is just go onto them, and if you bring up your extractor, I've got 7-zip, so I just do that, and I just go extract files, and it'll ask you, so because I've already done this, it'll say it's already done them. So it's saying here, where do I want to extract it to? Into here, and I just go OK. It'll actually make the folder here and extract them into that folder. So it doesn't extract them into the root folder here, it extracts it into their own folder. So that'll do this one, and then at the same time, while I'm using the unarchiving program, I also unpack version 11 as well into its own folder. So I've done both of those, and as you can see, I've also got Rufus on here. And the other thing you need to download, as I said, is Putty. So I downloaded and installed a version of Putty. Now once you've unarchived these, run Rufus if you haven't already done so, and install it, and that will go through and install Rufus on your machine. So I'll click this. I've already installed Rufus, but we'll go again. We go yes, and it's already installed, so now it's popped up to this, and this is what it looks like when it runs. And so what Rufus is, it will have a look for our SD card or our micro flash card, and then we have to install an image into it, and then once it's done all that, we just double check it is going to the right drive, and then if it is, then we tell it to start, and it will go through and write the image to the flash drive. And then when it's finished, it'll come up and say ready, and it will be green, and that just means we're ready to wait usually about 10 seconds after it comes up ready, because sometimes there is a caching with the drives writing and reading, and just if I can give it about 10 seconds to finish off anything that it may be doing that's not quite finished, then you can leave this open, because we're going to have to go back into here to do the second OS anyway. And then what you can do is eject the card out, and we can go into doing the install on the BeagleBone. Before we use that, we also need to install Putty. We need to install this on the machine, and this gives us our SSH terminal to be able to access the BeagleBone via the network. So install this if you haven't, then install Rufus. So once you've got both of those installed, exit out, because we have to find out what network port our BeagleBone is actually in. What we need to do is exit out of here. So what we need to do is, I've plugged my network cable into my router, and this is the other end. I'm going to plug that into my BeagleBone. I'm going to plug the power into the power board, and I'm going to plug it into the Mini B because that's the one I'm using, and then I'm going to turn the power on and turn the USB on, and as you'll see, it'll actually light up and all the lights flash on and off, and that's it, just doing its standard test. Now it will sit there and the lights will go backwards and forwards and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things. That's because of whatever's in the machine. They generally have a basic program, if it's not been used before, doing stuff in there, a little test program. So we're not going to worry about that. So what we need to do now is we need to find out what IP address this is using on the PC. We're going to jump back over to that and have a look and find out where our IP address is. Right, so what we need to do, guys, is we need to go and log into our router. Okay, and so I've linked into my router, and so on here I need to find out what my network address is for the BeagleBone. So find your way around, and what you should be able to do is you should be able to jump into an area that has your local network, and this is where my router starts at address 100 and goes up from there. But if I click on the network settings, it should tell me, as it says here in the client table, it picks up my BeagleBone as being on 192.168.1.101. Yours could be different, so this is where you need to find that out. We need this address because we have to use this when SSHing into the BeagleBone so we can access it to check everything out is working and log into the Linux operating system on there. So you need to write that address down. So whatever the one is for your BeagleBone, we need that address. So once you've done that, you can then jump back out of your router because that's the information we need. Okay, so hopefully you've got that information. You've gotten your Rufus set up, you've gotten your putty installed, and you've unpacked both of those files into their own folders. So now we've got that all set up, what we need to do is to get a micro SD card to go into the BeagleBone, which goes into on the back here where the micro SD is. What we'll do is I'll switch the BeagleBone off for now because we don't want to be putting it in and out while it's running because it could cause issues. And what I do for the PC is I've got one of these. I've got an SD with a micro SD adapter, and this is a multi-card reader that runs off the USB, and that has the same connector that the BeagleBone uses. I can plug this cable into the PC and use this as a storage device, and I can actually write the images with Rufus onto this. So I just make sure that's plugged in. Now I need the USB cable out of here, and I plug it into the power and data socket on that side, and then I plug that into one of the USB ports on my PC. So I'll do that, and then we'll switch back over and go through loading the software on the card. So okay guys, so I'm going to run Rufus now, and it always comes up and asks you that question, do you want to allow it to run? And I generally just say yes and run. Now this has picked up that the drive, it is got an image on it, but this will overwrite it, and it shows you what size your drive is. Now make sure that it is the right drive you're looking at. It pretty much looks for flash drives, so if you've got any other drives in it, it'd probably pay to pop them out while you actually do this, so you're not going to overwrite another drive. Okay, so then what we do is we go here and we go into images, and it's an ISO to select, and then we go to select an image, and it will say from where. You'll generally have to navigate to where you have unpacked it. And so what I'm going to do is I'll come up here, and we're going to do the 7.1 first. And you'll see that inside the folder it is now an IMG file or an image file. We select that, and it has told us in here it is a version 7 IMG file. So now if you're happy with all the settings, you don't need to change anything else. We click Start, and it'll check the configuration file and that, and then it will go through, and this is telling me that this is where it is. Any data on it will be wiped on this drive, and I know this is the right one, so I'm going OK. And then it will go through and it will start writing the image. Now this, depending on your system, whether you're using USB 3 or 2 or 1, this may take a little time for it to actually write to the CD. It's not a very big image, it's only about 2 gigs, I think it is. Okay, so there we have it. See, it's come up as ready, and that means it's finished flashing. But what we'll do is we'll leave it for a few more seconds just to let it finish doing, in case it's cached out and it's waiting to write that data to the disk or that. Some machines aren't that fast, and some of the cards aren't that fast, so I would rather just give it that extra 10 seconds and let it do that. And if you don't know, you just sit there and go 1001, 1002, 1003, and count to 10, and that should give you your 10 seconds. So I think that's about it. I think that's long enough. So I will pop the disk out, and we'll switch back over. Right guys, so I'm back here, so I'll now pop the disk out of here, and I will pop it into my Transflash. Now, when you put these in, there's a right and a wrong way. Don't force them in. It'll only go one way in. And I found, like on my BeagleBone, when I look at it, if I have my Transflash so the gold fingers are facing up and my BeagleBone is upside down, that is the way my card goes in. And it's a push to connect. And if you push it again, it ejects it out. Okay? So I've got it in there. I've still got my network cable plugged in, which is fine. That can stay in. And just make sure you're not going to put it on anything to short. And I should grab something to put down, something like that. And I will plug the power into this from my wall wart. We'll power it up, and we'll go back to programming this, and you'll see what we've got to do. Right, so I've got this plugged in. So now when we turn it on, it's going to automatically go into program mode, because there's a built-in piece of software on here that's going to look at the SD card and say, okay, what do you want me to do? And it's going to go through and program that software onto this board. And usually when you see that Cylon eye going backwards and forwards, that's it programming. And so you just keep watching, and that'll do that. And then it will do some sort of random LEDs after that. And when it's finished, all those LEDs will go out. And once it's done that, the same as when doing the SD card, give it about 10 seconds to make sure it has finished doing what it's doing. And then once it's done that, then you can power it off, because we have to reboot this once it's flashed anyway. Then we can log into it with putty, make sure this is flashed. Now generally, doing the older version first before the newer one, some of the bootloaders on these can't handle version 11 straight off, so that's why we've got to go version 7 first and then version 11. You don't, if you know you've got the new one that will handle 11 straight off, do it with that one straight away. If you don't know what one you got, because this is a revision C, I'm doing the old one first, then I will do the new one. And this takes a little time to do, probably about a minute or so. So you just leave it to go, and it will do its thing. You'll see when the lights finish chasing and go out. I thought it was stuck in a loop and didn't know what it was doing. As you can see, it's gone through and it's doing a self-check now. All the lights are on. And doing this, flashing it, won't change our IP address either. The machine will still keep the same IP address. Right, there you see now the lights have gone out over this side here, which means it is finished programming. We give this, as I said, 10 seconds. Just to make sure it's finished and we're not going to corrupt anything. And I think that should be okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll just pop the power out and eject the SD card, because we can't leave that in there because it'll want to try and reflash it a second time. Now I'm not going to change that yet in case this didn't flash properly. So we'll now plug the power in. This will go in, do its initialization. Okay, this is setting up, and it will take a few seconds to go through and set itself up. And that's why the lights are changing different things, because it's doing different bits and setting different things up. Then give it time to go through its whole cycle of installing and setting up. And that shouldn't take too long. Well, it may take a minute or two. You just have to let it do its thing. And usually you'll find when it's finished, it'll just be in a repeatable pattern and it won't change. So if it's gotten to that point, then what we can do is hit the reset option, and that'll reset the machine to reboot, and then we'll go in and try SSHing in with PuTTY. I think that's alright. So I just have to put my eyes on, guys, so I can see which one of these buttons is the reset. Just the outside one here. So if I press reset, that'll reboot it. So that's going to go through and reload up. Okay, so that's running. So now what we'll do is we'll go back to the screen and we'll go into PuTTY. So guys, so we just launched PuTTY, and then this is how it comes up. So what you want to do is when you get into PuTTY, if you know your IP address, type it in up the top here. So mine's 192.168.1.101. Leave the port as port 22. Don't change that. Make sure it is set as SSH. And what you can do then is click save, and that will save it in here with all these settings. So you don't have to type it in every time. So when you load it up next time, it'll come up like this. You just highlight this one and go load, and it puts all your information in for you. Alright, you only save it once. If you're doing different machines, you'll have to have different ones in, of course, but you can call them whatever you like. Now we've got that loaded, then we'll tell it to open, and this is going to open up a session with PuTTY to the BeagleBone. Now it tells us there's a warning logging in. Because this is being flashed the first time, it always warns us, so we accept that. And then we come into the login script. Now this is being the older version, we're going to need to use the older login, which is dbane, which is all lowercase, DEBIAN, and then press enter, and it will give us some information about things, and then it will have password. Now the password, we're not going to change this, we'll leave this. This is the default, called TEMPPWD, which is temp password. Be careful when you're typing it, and take your time, because it won't show you the password as you type it. It remembers it, so it doesn't echo it back to you. And then once you've typed it, press enter. And then once it's done, then you'll see that it's actually logged into dbane BeagleBone. Okay, and so that's telling us we've been able to successfully access the Linux software on the BeagleBone. So now what we want to do is we want to exit out of this, because this is telling us it's working fine for now. So we need to exit out of here and put on version 11, so we can have the latest version of the software on it. Alright guys, and that's going to be the same as what we did before. So once we exit out of here, we put our little transflash disk into the PC, do the same thing with Rufus over here, and put the version 11 on here, not 7.1. We'd go into it and we'd pull up the version 11 one, we'd open that up, and then what we do is then we'll flash that version onto the SD card, and we'd do the exact same thing as what we just did with the version 7. And as I was saying, I'm doing it this way because it's an older BeagleBone, and the flash software on the BeagleBone for reading the SDs and installing the operating system is an older version. You can do this with the newer ones if you want to as well, so it is up to you. You can try to know if you've got the older version. You could try putting 11 on straight away, the same way we're doing it here, but it may come up with an error and not install. Then you know you've got the older version. So then you'll have to go back and put 7 on, and then do the same thing, log into it, make sure it's working, then go back and put 11 on. And I just sort of think, just to be safe, why not go 7 then 11, and then you know you're okay. Alright guys, so I won't take you through those steps, but they are exactly the same as what we just done with the version 7. Okay, we'll go back now and we'll exit out of here. Right guys, so we're back here, and what I'll do is I'll put, this was set up originally, so I will go through and I'll put 11 back on here again. I don't mind redoing this just to show you guys what I'm doing and how I do it. I will do that. I mean, if you want me to go through and show you everything as I do it, I'm quite happy to do it. Some people get a little bit annoyed with saying, oh, you're just waffling on the same stuff over and over again. But, I mean, that is totally up to you. You can always fast forward, I suppose. So I'll just disconnect the beagle bone, and I will go over to my flash card writer, and put it in here. And this I find is really, really good. This is a little opacer one, and it has it for like the CF card readers. It's got the SD card, it's got the MS, the duos, and that. It'll do all those sorts of cards. You can get ones that do more than that. It also does the XD cards, etc. They're a nice little portable drive, you know. They're just a little wee USB portable one, and I don't think they're very dear. They're not that expensive to buy. But anyway, I will plug this in and we'll flash the version 11 on it. Okay, so I'm back in again. Here's Rufus. It's picked up my drive. I've got the version 11.8 here that I've selected, ready to flash. So I'm putting that one on, and yes, it is for that drive. Now what I do is before I go start, it's going to check the drive, and then it's going to warn me, say whatever's on here is going to be destroyed. Yep, that's fine, you can do that. So it's going to delete whatever's on there, and it's going to reflash it. And this is just doing, as I said, exactly the same as what we did in 7. So I'll let this go through and do its thing. We'll speed all these pieces up. Alright guys, there we have it. So that's version 11. I don't know what happened to start with there, why it came up with that error. Not had that before, but as you see, I just went in there and cancelled that and then told it to redo it, and it went through and it flashed it fine this time. It may have been the machine was doing something on the USBs at the time and it caused a hiccup. And this is why I sort of say that you'll give them a little time to finish doing what they're doing before you take things in and out, because they can cause errors. As I say, that one's all done. So what I will do is I'll unplug this and put it into the BeagleBone now. Right guys, so I'm just unplugging it and taking it out. And as I was saying before, it's exactly the same as what we did with the version 7 and flashing it and logging in. We do exactly the same things. So SD card in, power in. Now I suppose it would be a lot easier if I did have a barrel jack for it. Get it to power on so I don't have to keep pulling the USB cable in now. But hey, it's something extra I don't have to have. And this will go through the same thing it did before. Now it's going in, it's doing the backwards and forwards chasing again, which is programming the BeagleBone. Now these machines, these backup units, these are actually quite expensive. They're around about $90 odd for one of these. There must be something that's cheaper than these for the boards. I haven't seen anything. Everything, even the newest versions that I've seen now, use the same BeagleBone boards. So I don't know whether it's, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I would have thought these would have come down in price, like a lot of the other development boards have over time. As before, we just wait for this to finish and turn itself off. When the lights are all gone out, so again, we count to 10 just to give us a bit of buffering, and then unplug the cable, take the SD out, let it boot up, and program itself, and then we can do a reset on it after it's done all that, and then try logging into it again. And then once we logged into it, we can move on from there, because then all the software is actually installed on here and out of those images. Okay, so I think that's about it. So what we'll do is we'll unplug it and remove the SD card. And I'll put that back in the holder so I don't lose it. And then what we can do is we can power it back up and let it install itself and get ready. Okay, I think that's finished now, so what we can do is jump onto the PC and just through PuTTY again, try logging in with the same login we used with 7 and see if we can log into it. And as I was saying before, with PuTTY up there, you'll have the saved login. If you went through and saved it the first time, if you click on that and go load, it loads all your information back up for logging in through the SSH. And then from there we just go open, and because it sees it as a new install again of Linux, we just have to accept the license, and then we're logged in up here, and this is where we put in the same username and password to log into it. And we get the same disclaimer and then the same password as before. And there we are. Now we're logged into the newer version of the software for the BeagleBone. One thing we need to do is when we're here is we actually want to make a directory to work with. Okay, so what we're going to do is to make sure we're in the root directory, we go CD, and we are, and we want to go mkdir, and then a space, and then what we want to call the folder. So we'll call it BONDWELL, Bondwell, and we press enter, and that should have made the directory. Now to check that, we can actually go to that directory. So we'll go CD to change the directory to Bondwell, and now you see that it's actually saying to us that we're in the directory Bondwell. So that's where we need to be. So when we log in to do anything now, we want to make sure we go into the Bondwell directory, so, or whatever your directory name is, because that's where everything's going to be saved and made. Okay, so what we now need to do, okay, and so the other thing is too, so if you get a little lost and things go off the screen, if you want to know what your directory is you're working on, you go pwd, and that tells you the directory you're working in, and the pwd stands for print working directory. Now if you want to go back to the root directory, which is the top level one, you just do CD, and that takes you right back to the very beginning, and that'll take you from anywhere back to the root directory on the Linux machine. That's what we needed to know. So I mean, that's all working. That's telling us that the PC is SSHing into the BeagleBone now. So now what we need to do is go back and set the BeagleBone up on the board and get it all ready with the drive. And there's a few things we have to do over there. So for now we can actually exit out of here and go back to the other screen. Right guys, so we're back here now. So what I will do is I'll power this off because it can't be on while we plug it in. And as I was saying, when you do this board, power it up first and check your voltages. So you won't have 3.3 because that comes off the BeagleBone, but check your 5-volt rail. When I first set this up and did it, that resistor was wrong that I was telling you about, and that was giving me 10 volts or just over 10 volts on the 5-volt rail, and I thought it had done all sorts of damage to the board. I was lucky I didn't have it on for long, so the chips were a little bit forgiving and don't seem to be damaged. We finally found out that this resistor was wrong, so that's why dropping that one into the 3.7k put this down to the 5 volts. And then when the 5 volts was on there, we were all good. And it didn't damage the BeagleBone because these have over voltage protection built into them. So if it tried to push more than 5 volts into this, it would actually just shut down. It wouldn't actually run. What we do is then we go on here, we'll put the BeagleBone on, and from the last video all I've done is soldered in 2 sets of headers on this side, on the bottom, because if you physically look at it, it's not going to fit on the top. There's too much stuff in the way on the top for this to plug in. It has to go on the bottom of the board. So just make sure that that's where you're putting it, is on the bottom of the board. Make sure all the pins line up pin for pin, and plug it in. Now, the jumpers you want to have set, now you can leave them on drain for now when you power it up, just to make sure everything's going to work okay. But to know if your caps are working, you need to put that on fill, so the LED will actually slowly light up. These two jumpers down here, these are for the drives, so this can run up to 2 hard drives and emulate 2 hard drives, so you can set them for drive 1 and drive 2, or drive 3 and drive 4, depending on what the situation calls for on the system you're running. So that'll go from drive 1, 2, 3 and 4, and the same on this one as 1, 2, 3 and 4. If you're not putting a second hard drive in, just have it jump it as a drive anyway. It's not good to run them without a jumper. The jumper for here for the write pin, don't put that on, because that enables you to write to hard drives, and we don't want to write to the hard drive. What we're going to do first is actually read from the drive to image it. So that's what we're going to be doing through this part of it. I haven't gone down the track of writing a new image to a hard drive, but it shouldn't be much different than the reading. It's just the command you put in at the very beginning is a little bit different, and you have to put that jumper on. So I'm not going to do that. I'm only making an image of it at this stage. With this all plugged in and ready to go, I know my one works alright, so I will put the jumper on fill, and then we'll power this on. You'll see the LEDs down here on the beagle bone will go, and then you should see this LED here. It's a violet one, or purple one. Now what you'll see is it'll be dim, and it will get brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. What we've got to do is, this runs off the power from the board, and what we need to do this is we need a power source. So get yourself an old AT power supply if you've got one, or even an ATX with an adapter that'll give you a power supply you can turn on and off. And we just need a standard hard drive power connector, not a SATA, just a standard power one. And what we're going to do is plug that in, and then we need to put the power into the back of that. Okay, so that's all in there. So you don't run the power directly into here. If you're going to run the power through the barrel jack, you need to remove the DC to DC converter, because that is doing the similar job to what this will do. But this is in here so that the power will come in here and then run through and run everything off the main power pack. This is more for if you want to make it portable, but you can get small power packs like I did with the Dragon, which would probably run it fine, or get a slightly bigger one than the one I used in the Dragon, and put one of these Molnex connectors on it that's wired the right way around, and you can put one of those little power packs in a case and have it as a portable unit that way. So we've got this all plugged in and that. So now if we turn this on, power light comes on, booting up, and as you'll see, you should slowly see that light start to, you can just start brightening up, and that'll go up to its full brightness. And then once that is all brightened up, that means the capacitors are fully charged. You can use whatever colour LED you want in there. That was the one I just grabbed out of the box and stuck in. I haven't soldered it in, I've just bent the pin so it's actually sitting in there, not connected. It goes into the double-sided tape on the other side, so it's not going to short on anything. I must solder it in there. I've just got it in there now as the indicator. So this is all in and seems to be working fine. So now we've got this. Why I'm using this power supply is because I've also got to power up the hard drive. We need power for the board, and we need power for the hard drive. So what I'll do is I will grab the hard drive, we'll put it up here, wire it up, and the other thing you're going to need, a pair of MFM hard drive cables. And you're going to need the 34 pin or 36 pin and the little 1820 pin one as well. So we're only doing one drive, so we only need one cable. We need those because they go on the header. When you go to use this in a PC, you need cables that go from the edge connectors back to the board itself, back to the PC. Alright, so that's just something we need to sort out later on. So these need to be edge connected to the original controller in the PC if we wanted to try booting the PC up off of this unit. So what we'll do is I will power this off, and then I will plug in the cables. And as you'll see, this is what the caps are doing. It's allowing this to shut down. When it gets down to a low enough point, this will actually turn itself off. And then you'll notice that will actually go really, really dim. But as you see, by watching that, it takes a little while for it to shut down. So there it is. Now it's to that point where that's gone up. Now if you want to quickly turn it off from here, you just remove this jumper and pop it on the drain. And on drain, you'll notice that'll go out fairly fast. It's almost gone. Yep, I think that's it. I think that's finished. That's empty now. And that's how quickly you can drain them. And that just runs through this big bleed resistor that we put in the big 3-watt one. The jumper we need to use is pin 20, or sorry, jumper 6, JP6, and the 34 pin JP4. So those are the two we need to use to read a drive from. The drive, and this is the one out of the Bondwell, and this is an ST212. It's a really nice drive actually. It's in really, really good condition. So what we're going to do, I've taken the controller board off here because we don't need it on here when we're backing up the drive. So we're going to need power. So we plug power into this. Okay. I'll try and get this somehow. So it's going to look like that. These are keyed. So another way to remember too is these are keyed generally for the plugs on the boards, so that pin 1 is the red stripe. Now if you're looking at these old drives, you'll notice that there's a couple of connectors and then there's a slit cut in the board, and then the rest of the connectors. The side where the slit is, where the two connectors are, the first one is pin 1, so that's the side the red stripe goes to. So that's another way you can remember which way around these cables go on. Some of these connectors will actually have a little plastic blade in them, so you can't put them in backwards. And those were some of the earlier ones to stop you putting them in the wrong way round and causing an issue. Alright, so we got the drives all plugged up, the board's all connected up, and so what we do is then we'll power it on and let the drive spin up and everything gets ready. I put the jumper on the beagle bone back to fill, which is what we need for when we shut down, and we'll power it on. So once we've powered up with all this, then we need to go back into the software. We need to go back into putty, and then when we've gone back into putty, we need to log back into the beagle bone, and then this is where we're going to go through and run the internal software that's on the beagle bone to check the drive. Once we've checked the drive, then we're going to back the drive up. Okay, so while we're in putty, we can go in and load our configuration file and open, and then we've got to log back in again. Now I know there must be an easier way of doing this if you're doing it all the time. I'm not 100% on how to do that, but it's something we can, if you did it often enough, you'd want to look into it. But it's not something I'm doing a lot of. And there we are, we're logged in, and then remember we want to change to our Bondwell directory. So now we're in our Bondwell directory. Now what we need to do is we need to set up so that the software can look at the drive. So what we need to do is type in setup _ MFM _ read. While we're running the session of putty, we only need to do this once. Now if we were going to write a disk from an image, we would actually put write instead of read. So we put that in, and now that looks and tells us what revision board we're running to make sure this is working fine, and it is. We're running version C or D, and we're running C, which is fine. While we're in here, the next command will be this. And so what I'll do is I will put that up on the screen here for you, and this is the command we need to run. Now this will interrogate the drive to find out what the settings are with the drive. it's pretty good at picking stuff up. So if you need to manually put your settings in, if you have any errors, this will tell you what they are. So we'll run this. Okay, and that's gone through and done everything we've told it to. Okay, so as you can see, this has got all the information and it's not come up with any errors at all. This drive is in really good condition. So we have the files we're looking for, the EMU file, we've got the image file, the ISO file, and we've also got the log file which has all the information about the drive and any problems it may have found. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy make a copy of this file onto the root directory, just so we can check it so we don't damage this file, or if there is anything in it that we need to know. So we're not going to damage anything in this folder. So what we'll do is we'll copy that file out to the root directory, and then we can look at it to see if the file looks fine. If the file looks fine, we've created the image. Then from there it's a matter of just copying the image off of the BeagleBone and putting it onto your PC or onto a flash drive or something like that, and then from there you can do what you like. Now I will do this bit first, and then we'll come back to where we are with the Bondwell after this. Right guys, so what we're going to do is, because this is in read mode, we need to set it now up into emulation mode. So to do that, we actually have to shut down the BeagleBone and reboot it to put it into EM mode. So what we can do is we can push the power button, and that should actually tell it to power down. Right, so log into PuTTY, and it's the same login as before. Same password. Right, and so what we'll do is we go into Bondwell folder, change into there. So the first thing we have to do before we do that is we got to do setup underscore EMU, and that just tells the software to set the board into emulation mode rather than into the mode we need for reading the disk and archiving it. Right, so what we need to type in here now is CP, which is the copy program command. And so what we want to do is copy the program from the Bondwell folder. The file is bondwell.emu. And then what it's going to do is it's just going to copy it to the root directory, which is going to rename it as Bondwell EMU. Right, so, and sorry, we have to do that from the root directory. So we just cd up and then type the same command in again. Or if you use the right mouse button and click on the line in the PuTTY, it'll actually put it back in and just press enter, and that'll copy it. So if we do a dir in here, it shows us it's got the Bondwell EMU file in the root directory. So right from here, and then we need to go in and run it for it to put up all the information about the drive to see if the image that we made of the drive is in good condition. Right, now this is the next command we need to type in, which is MFM underscore EMU space 2 minuses, then drive space 1 space 2 minuses file space bondwell.emu. Now this is telling it to mount it as drive 1 so that we can see if this drive is okay. And this is the copy we're using in the root directory, remember. And there you see, so it's gone through and it's checked that image for what it is. and we can go through here. So it's telling us it's exactly what we thought it was. There's no errors, there's no write or Q errors or anything in it. There's no bad directories or anything. So that image looks really, really good as an archive image. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And it's telling us exactly how much is on the drive as well. So yeah, that is really, really good. Now if you want to know more about this, read the documentation on the PDP8 website, and that will tell you all you need to know about reading, writing and that sort of stuff. Right, so to this point, I'll just swap you back, guys. Right, now to this point, what I have is I have the image on the hard drive, and I have it now on the BeagleBone. It's actually stored on here. So I've got to take it off here and put it onto the PC or onto a flash drive or something like that. And those instructions are actually on the website. Don't reflash your BeagleBone if you haven't copied them off, because if you haven't copied those files off, when you reflash the software, it's going to wipe everything that's in the non-volatile memory that's in here. So that's where you need to copy that stuff off. So when we got to this point, I then set the Bondwell up on the table, and we used the controller. There were a few issues with it, because the way the Bondwell card is, it has header connectors here with a small cable, but it has the edge-to-edge connector on here, and it doesn't have a header on here. So to get this to get the BeagleBone to interface to this board, I had to use this cable on the edge connector here. I can use that cable to go from that onto here. Though why they didn't put a pin header on here, I don't know. It would have been nice if they did, but so anyway, we did get this on, powered it up. As you can see here, the weird way they connect the drives to these boards, they had wires soldered from this power connector to the drive power connector underneath. So I just detached those, and when I put it back in, I'll reattach those. So we did plug this in, plug that in, and we did try running the EMU on here, but the Bondwell is still not picking up either the EMU. We tried the hard drive, and it still won't pick up the hard drive either. So I'm picking there is a fault on this controller board, so that needs to be looked at before I can go down the track of trying to get it to boot with a hard drive. So I'm sorry guys, but there's not a lot I can do. So there's going to be some more troubleshooting on this to find out why this is not working, but we have an image of the hard drive, which is good. So that'll be the next thing. I'll just look at the commands I need to dump it off here onto the PC, and then I will have the hard drive image and the ROMs, and I just got to sort out the floppy disk images to upload as well, and then that'll all be done, and then I can get on working onto the controller on this. But I have to try and find some documentation on this controller to find out signals and things like that, to whether there's anything available. If anybody knows of any schematics for this board or anything like that, let me know. You know, put some comments down below for us, links to sites or whatever that can help me out with that. But so this is where we're up to, guys. I think that's about as far as we can go for now. I will let you know where I go. If we can sort this out, I'll come back with a video on repairing this and what the problems were, whether it's here or on the board, on the Bondwell itself, and we'll try and sort out what the story is. Alright, I'll catch you on the next one. See you soon.